This one? No, not that one. Okay, so these two here, you may remember this one because I talked about it when I talked about aligned continuity on Cultural Fortress. So these are all the primes, and also Primus in the middle, from the aligned continuity. So there's a minor confusion with Transformers because Primus, Unicron, and the 13 primes, and a couple of other characters, are considered multiversal singularities. So there's only one of them in the multiverse. So basically every different interpretation of the primes that you see is all the same character. And, well, before the Shroud, this was the case. I'll explain the Shroud in a minute. So right here, the Fallen right here. Before the Shroud, he was basically the same character across different media. So you would have the Fallen from Dreamwaves comics. Then he would next appear in the Revenge of the Fallen movie, and it would be the same character across both those two different medias and the two different continuities. And what ended up happening was some of the different writers would come in and write stories and either ignore the fact that they're supposed to be the same characters across different continuities, or they just didn't understand, because some writers would make a story related to a character that conflicts with what's already been done. And with this happening a couple of times, it eventually got way too complicated and too difficult to try and figure out, and the Collectors Club itself was even adding like stories trying to fix those issues. And this eventually resulted in the Collectors Club deciding to write a story called Another Light, which has an event called the Shroud in it, where basically this prime down here in the bottom corner, the red and blue one down here, next to his prime, is where basically he used the Star Saber and another blade called the Terminus Blade, and he used them both to strengthen the borders between different universes and basically render multiversal singularities as separate individual beings across the multiverse, just like everyone else. And it's kind of the part that's frustrating about the Shroud is I understand the intention was to make it easier for people to understand, because they're separate characters now, and they don't have to match up. They can now freely contradict each other. But the reason that was done was so Hasbro could have a little more freedom to tell whatever stories they want with these characters and not have to worry about the past rules that have been established. But what ended up happening is Hasbro hasn't actually done much with these characters. Like, everything that Hasbro has done with these characters could easily fit in with the previous rules before the Shroud. So it's kind of like, why exactly did you make that decision? Because it seems to not really be necessary.
Right.
Yeah, like the different appearances of Unicron in the Transformers media after the Shroud. Most of them could actually pretty easily fit into what had previously been established about Unicron. Obviously, with the exception being Transformers: The Last Knight, because that film uses Unicron the same way the aligned continuity does. And also, there is a case for non-multiversal singularity versions of these characters to exist alongside their singularity counterparts, like the Japanese continuity. Because the Unicron in the Japanese continuity is called a Primacronian Unicron, he is actually separate from the multiverse Unicron, and that existed before the Shroud. So it's like the Shroud didn't need to happen, especially since the multiverse was kind of building to a specific conclusion as well. And yeah, the Shroud kind of disrupts that. It ends up leaving that kind of meta story off on an unsatisfying cliffhanger. Yeah. So the actual goal with the convention stories that they were telling and they were building towards was basically an event called Till All Are One, where basically all of the different universes would be merged together into one universe that has all the best aspects of all of them. I suppose the best comparison would be kind of a Crisis on Infinite Earths type story, but for
Sure.
Transformers. Maybe not exactly the same, but kind of the similar idea. Although in this case, the whole meta story was building to that event rather than everything getting too complicated and then management being like, okay, we need to clean this up and make it easier for people to understand what's going on. I'm pretty sure that's what Crisis on Infinite Earths, what like its original intention was, wasn't it?
Exactly. They just a real quick tangent.
Yep.
For DC had just gone through a period of a lot of acquisitions of other storylines,
Oh yeah, because they
and
bought the Charlton Heroes.
they bought Charlton and some others too. It
Oh
wasn't
yeah, and
just
Shazam or the original Captain
right, the
Marvel.
Fawcett comics and so forth, and they wanted to. And plus, they had their own internal, Earth One, Earth Two, and they did want to streamline all of that.
Yeah.
They did a great job, but unfortunately, there was some little strands of continuity, and then over time, they just kept picking at those little strands, trying to fix this and fix that, and they ended up making it worse over time.
Yeah. I believe Hawkman is kind of related to that kind of issue, isn't he?
And Hawkman actually was a great example of somebody that thought through how to get him to work, right? Because you have Earth 1 and Earth 2 where, Earth 2 takes place in like the 40s, World War II, and Earth 1 was
Yeah.
supposed to have been the 70s, 80s, characters. Plus they were going into a reboot where everything was going to be even more current. So this idea of one character who reincarnates over the generations, that works. Wonder Woman, being somewhat immortal, could have served in World War II, come back later in World War One, so forth. There was a lot of those kinds of things. But then Superman, what do you do with Superman? Superman's not immortal. You don't want him in World War II and having a storyline today. So these were the
Yeah.
kinds of things that got short-sighted. Sounds a little bit like there was some thoughts of those same kinds of things in the Transformers.
Yeah. Yeah. So basically, this roster right here is of the aligned continuity 13 primes, who are separate from the multiverse 13 primes, which I will point out, aligned continuity was made before the Shroud happened. So Hasbro specifically made the aligned continuity to be separate from the rest of the multiverse and not follow the rules of everything else.
Yeah.
And for the most part, everyone involved in that project cooperated with that idea. Some were a little more. Some of the companies working on that were a little more rebellious than others. So yeah, this assortment of images or some different images that I've got here. These are the 13 primes, like the multiverse ones. The ones that exist across the multiverse as an individual person or an individual character that travels from universe to universe rather than exist rather. I think Primus is the only one who exists across the multiverse simultaneously
Mm-hmm.
because he's a god of order. He stabilizes the multiverse together. If he dies, the multiverse just falls apart. And yeah, so essentially there are some different characters here. So you have some of the same ones like Primer, Legion Maximo, the Fallen, Nexus Prime, Vector Prime, Micronus, Alchemist Prime. Oh yeah, Onyx Prime and Solus Prime, and then Alpha Trion. Although the multiverse version of Alpha Trion is called Solomus Prime rather than Alpha Trion, but it's effectively the same person, so
Mm-hmm.
doesn't necessarily matter which name you use, it's the same character either way. And then you have these three images here. So this purple one here. Wait, is my mouse? Oh, it's not. Yeah, this purple one here is Epistemus. He's from the IDW comics, and he's a member of a group called the Guiding Hand, who sometimes are classified as primes and then sometimes not. obviously IDW Comics goes more for the mythology angle rather than them rather than characters really being divine beings. But there is a version of Epistemus who is actually a prime. And then this one right here, the one with the wings pointing upwards, underneath Onyx Prime, that is Logos Prime. He's actually from the Japanese continuity. And one thing I'll say about the Japanese continuity, they are like very dedicated to making sure everything fits together, and there's like filling every available slot that they can. Because like when you look at the Japanese G1 timeline, it's like very expansive, and there's multiple stories fitting into every little gap available and filling plot holes and contradictions.
Almost like they feel like if it's worth doing right. Can you imagine that?
Yeah. And also the Japanese fans of Transformers, they're just as much fans of continuity as they are fans of the brand itself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because like you have an instance like actually I'll use an example of like when the G1 or when the Japanese continuity filled in a plot hole. So in the season 3 of the original cartoon, in the American side, the character of Trypticon was constructed on Earth during season 3, which takes place in like 2006. But in the Japanese continuity, because they didn't get the movie, so they weren't aware that the events of that and season 3 take place in the future. Obviously, for the Japanese continuity, they moved it to 2010 rather than 2005. But effectively, they weren't aware of that. So when before the movie came out, they made a Japanese exclusive like mini film or special called Scramble City that introduces a couple characters that would then appear in the movie in season 3. And one of the characters they introduced was Trypticon. But Scramble City takes place during the events of during like the same year that the show itself was on. So I think Scramble City was like 1986, 1985, around that time. And when the season 3 came out, they didn't actually change any of the they didn't change any of the stories. They just changed the year they take place in. So when it came time to do the episode that introduces Trypticon, they ended up with an error where they have a previous story they've already written exclusively for their markets that introduces the character decades before he actually appears, and then they have the episode that introduces him as being constructed in the time the episode takes place. So you have like this contradiction of when Trypticon was actually made, and what they did is years later, the Legends manga written by what was his name? Actually, no, I'm not gonna worry about. But the writer of the Legends manga basically took the opportunity because the Titans Return toy line was releasing a Trypticon toy, and the Legends manga is basically meant to accompany those toys and tell a little story, tell like a short story in the instruction manual for those characters. And what the writer did for Trypticon is he actually fixed the plot hole with Trypticon by establishing that in the Japanese continuity, Trypticon was made back in the 80s, then destroyed in a battle with Metroplex, and then his memory was kept on a smaller character called Full Tilt, who was a toy that comes with Trypticon. He basically established that Trypticon's mind and memories and everything are on Full Tilt, and Full Tilt survived until the events of season 3, where the Decepticons then used him to then rebuild Trypticon on Earth in the events of the episode from season 3. So they effectively plugged that like plot hole that was accidentally created because they
Yeah.
didn't have the movie and they didn't know, and the season 3 hadn't come out yet. There are actually other instances of the Japanese continuity kind of filling in plot holes here and there, like Wheeljack. He dies in the events of the '86 movie, But later on in one of the Japanese cartoons, Wheeljack appears alive with no explanation. Although that was mostly because Japan didn't get the movie until after his appearance in that Japanese show. Or I think it was like 1990 when Japan got that movie, and that episode of Victory that had Wheeljack came out before then, so they didn't really know that he was dead.
Mm.
And what they did is, I think it was like in the early 2000s, a story called Binal Tech or Alternators or Alternity. Which, I forgot which is the actual name for the Japanese version.
Mm-hmm.
But in that story, they actually established that Wheeljack, after the one from the G1 cartoon died in the movie, another Wheeljack from a different universe had traveled to the G1 universe and basically took his place sometime after the real one died, and basically accounting for the fact that Wheeljack, or the Wheeljack of the Japanese timeline, was technically dead.
Ah,
So another one
clever.
kind of came in and filled the gap.
Yeah.
So the Wheeljack you see in Victory isn't the same one you see in season 1 and 2 and the movie itself. That one is actually a separate character from a different reality who just looks very similar and basically acts the same.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and this one in the very bottom corner, that's I keep forgetting the mouse isn't synced up on both screens. Yeah, so down here, there's one at the very bottom, the comic panel.
Mm-hmm.
That is the last Autobot from the Marvel comic, specifically the US comic. He was retroactively declared a member of the Primes.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, when the Marvel comic came out, they never established him as a Prime then. But it wasn't until later on that he was then retroactively declared to be one of the Primes. I believe his name is Autonomous Maximus, or you could just call him the Last Autobot, because that's what he was. That's what he was called in the comic itself.
Yeah.
Uh, I do know that there are a couple other members of the Guiding Hand from IDW that are sometimes referred to as primes as well, but it's probably best not to. Probably best to just sort of think of them as like mythological versions of already existing primes. Yeah. So what else was it? Oh yeah. There are a couple of events that happened throughout the multiverse that are like very specific, because you have the Universe War, which is a story told in the collectors, well, not collectors of the 3H production comics about the Universe comics, which I
Mm-hmm.
have actually talked about before, or mentioned before at least, where like Unicron and Primus are bringing different characters from different universes and bringing them together and making them fight each other. And then you have what else? What other event was it? There's also the Unicron singularity crisis from the Cybertron cartoon, because at the end of Energon, Unicron's body is destroyed, then his spark is thrown into an Energon sun, and then his evil corrupts it and causes it to collapse into a black hole. And him as a black hole is then threatening to consume the entire universe, and possibly the entire multiverse if it gets big enough. And
Jeez, that's
essentially,
that's what I call overkill. Let's
yeah,
really make sure this guy is dead, dead, dead. The sun, the planets all around him are dead. Let's destroy the
yeah,
whole darn universe.
yeah, and basically all different Transformers from various universes
Mm-hmm.
uh, then were then noticed this event happening and took whatever measures they could to try and prevent the Unicron singularity from absorbing the entire universe. I think the Autobots from the Cybertron cartoon itself searched for the Cyber Planet keys to awaken Primus and have him sort the problem out.
Mm-hmm.
Um, then you have other characters from other universes making other different decisions. Like you have one of Unicron's heralds from the Collectors Club, the Armada Ramjet figure. He, as one of Unicron's heralds, decides well, Unicron's dying. His whole goal is to consume everything and leave it as an empty void. And Primus is the stabilizing factor of the multiverse. If we kill Primus and Unicron, then everything will die. So then Ramjet kind of has this plan of letting Unicron die while also killing Primus at the same time and causing like the entire universe to just fade away into nothing and effectively achieve Unicron's whole plan. And so while that was happening, the obviously by the end of Cybertron, Primus is woken up, and then the black hole is closed, and that whole crisis is averted. What else? Well, I really should have wrote down some of this beforehand. But yeah. After the Unicron Singularity Crisis, you then also have the events of Regeneration One, which probably have an incredibly important, or probably have the most important detail for the multiverse. Is that the hot rod of the Regeneration One comics basically cut off that universe from the rest of the multiverse. Obviously, he did this in order to save reality from a previous evil being that had appeared in the comics. Obviously, a lot of this relies on you knowing previous events and having read other stories.
Right.
Yeah, so obviously, Hot Rod cuts off the original Marvel universe or the Regeneration One timeline from the rest of the multiverse. I think it's an because I know there's a theoretical point in Transformers called the 0 point, which is essentially the theoretical point when all universes are one universe rather than multiple realities. And when Hot Rod cut off a universe, or suddenly cut off a universe from the rest of the multiverse, that kind of destabilized everything a little bit. And that also fractured the 0 point as well. So obviously obviously with that happening, then leading into the Shattered Glass universe with an evil Ultra Magnus basically invading another version of the another Splinter timeline from the Marvel comics and completely wiping that universe out. And I think then everyone from that reality was then brought to the Shattered Glass universe. Oh yeah, I will also point out there's one part I completely forgot about. In the Japanese, one of the Japanese continuities, I think I think it's called the Cloud World. The Autobots and Decepticons of that world fight this sort of monster called the Hytherion, who essentially exists to devour dead universes and basically prevent the universe from being clogged with too many universes. During the events of the Alternity storyline, the inhabitants of the Cloud World successfully destroy the Hytherion. It's kind of one of those instances where they understand why they want to get rid of the Hytherion because it's deadly and it's attacking them, but at the same time it does have a higher purpose in the multiverse overall. So destroying it, even though it was for a good reason, did kind of upset the balance in the multiverse. Now dead universes won't be devoured by it. They'll just continue to build until there's a bunch of dead universes. And the destruction of essentially the destruction of the Hytherion, the shattering of the 0 point, and the destruction of one universe by the Shattered Glass, by the evil Autobots of the Shattered Glass universe, essentially results in the multiverse becoming more and more unstable, which is what leads to Nexus Prime using the Starsaber and Terminus Blade to then enact the Shroud in an attempt to try and mitigate the damage done to the multiverse that was going to get worse and worse. So, personally, I would have preferred that the Shroud not happen, because some of the different versions of Unicron and the Primes could definitely be placed in with the other versions with no real issue.
Yeah.
Yes, we have these two.